In the modern world, you wake up every morning believing you are free. Free to choose what to wear, what to eat, what to become. Free to express, to consume, to decide. It feels like freedom, but what if it isn't? What if the endless menu of possibilities surrounding you isn't a symbol of liberation, but a subtle form of psychological imprisonment? What if, beneath the glitter of infinite choice, your mind is slowly drowning in its own freedom? Every day, you face hundreds of decisions before noon. The color of your shirt, the words in your message, the tone of your reply, the post you engage with, the food you order, the music you play. Each decision feels small, but your brain treats every single one as work. And work, no matter how invisible, consumes energy. We call it decision fatigue, the quiet exhaustion that builds as the brain tries to calculate outcomes for an ocean of meaningless choices. You don't notice it until the evening, when even deciding what to watch feels overwhelming. The mind wants freedom, but it wasn't built for infinity. There was a time when choice meant survival. A wrong path could end your life, and a right one could save your tribe. Choice carried gravity, and gravity gave meaning. Today, we've stripped choice of its consequence and replaced it with quantity. We've turned decision-making into an endless loop of trivial preference, and then wondered why our lives feel so hollow. We once dreamed of a world where anything was possible. Now we live in that world, and we are lost. Freedom has become noise. You can reinvent yourself in a day, buy a new identity in seconds, follow thousands of voices, and yet, somehow, feel unseen. Because when everything is possible, nothing feels significant. Psychologists call this the paradox of choice. The more options we have, the less satisfied we become with any single one. Every decision opens 10 doors and leaves 100 closed, and the human mind can't help but imagine what could have been behind each of them. Regret becomes constant background noise. Even happiness begins to feel suspicious, temporary, incomplete, unstable. You see it in love, too. When choices were few, people learned to build. Now we swipe through human beings like catalogs, each one a maybe, each one a temporary fix for curiosity. We crave connection but can't tolerate imperfection, because the next person, the next face, the next message, the next possibility is only a swipe away. This is how abundance becomes emptiness, not because we lose what's meaningful, but because meaning itself gets diluted. In a sea of infinite possibilities, we lose the ability to see depth. Every experience becomes shallow, every decision reversible, every emotion short-lived. Freedom has become the most elegant illusion of control. We believe we are the architects of our destiny, yet the more options we hold, the more we rely on algorithms to decide for us. We outsource our willpower to recommendation engines that know our impulses better than we do. We tell ourselves we're choosing, but the truth is, most choices have already been made for us. We scroll not because we seek, but because we can't stand still. We consume not because we need, but because we've forgotten how to stop. Every new decision feels like progress, but it's often just movement, a desperate attempt to feel in control while being guided by invisible hands. The mind, in its essence, evolved to make sense of scarcity. It thrives when choices are few, when clarity is high, when the difference between good and bad is visible. But in the digital age, where abundance is infinite, the brain faces a problem evolution never prepared it for: the burden of endless freedom. Freedom sounds noble, but psychologically, it's chaos. Because to choose one thing is to kill 1,000 others, and our brains, wired for empathy and imagination, grieve for the lives we didn't live. Every unchosen path becomes a ghost of what could have been. And the more choices we have, the more ghosts we carry. So we try to simplify. We make lists, routines, habits, tiny rituals to reduce the storm. But even structure feels fragile now. One notification, one ad, one new possibility, and the cycle begins again. We crave certainty, but we worship novelty. It's a psychological contradiction we can't seem to escape. Modern freedom doesn't feel like flying. It feels like falling in slow motion through endless open space, where there is no ground, no direction, no finish line. And in that fall, our perception begins to distort. Because the paradox of choice isn't just about decisions, it's about dimensions of perception. The more our minds expand, the less we actually see. Just as light can blind, information can obscure. We scroll through realities we can't process, each one screaming for attention. Our senses can perceive only a fraction of the world, yet we act as if we can comprehend infinity. Every day, our attention is split across hundreds of dimensions: digital, emotional, social, existential. Each dimension promises fulfillment, but all compete for the same limited mental space. In chasing them all, we fragment our sense of self. And perhaps this is the hidden cost of modern freedom, the quiet loss of unity. Because the more we can be, the less we know who we are. Choice gives us power, but it also steals coherence. We can reinvent ourselves endlessly, but at the cost of stability. We can travel anywhere, but lose our sense of home. We can see everything, but rarely see clearly. Maybe that's why, despite living in the most connected era in history, we've never felt more isolated. Because freedom without direction is a maze without walls. You can move forever, but never arrive. The human mind, brilliant as it is, wasn't designed for infinity. It seeks boundaries, meaning, proportion, a sense of enough. And yet, our culture worships the opposite. We're told to want more, do more, be more. The result is a subtle psychological suffocation, a silent anxiety that lives beneath abundance. Every new opportunity whispers, you could have more. Every comparison reminds you, you should have more. And in that whisper lies the real prison, not made of walls or bars, but of expectations. The paradox of choice is not about options. It's about perception, how the mind interprets freedom and transforms it into pressure. We think we've escaped the limitations of the past, but we've built new ones inside our own heads. Because true freedom isn't about having infinite paths. It's about knowing which ones matter. And yet, we continue to chase infinity, believing that somewhere, beyond one more decision, one more click, one more choice, we'll finally find peace. But peace doesn't live there. It never has. It lives in stillness, in limits, in less. There's a strange kind of sadness that hides beneath abundance. It's quiet, shapeless, not born from loss, but from too much. A sadness that doesn't come from having nothing, but from not knowing what to do with everything. We live in an era where the universe fits in our pockets. Every answer, every face, every dream, all compressed into glowing screens. And yet, the more we access, the less we actually feel. Our minds are flooded with choice, but our hearts are paralyzed by it. You've probably felt it, that faint emptiness after hours of scrolling, that strange ache after a perfect day, that moment when silence feels unbearable. It's not boredom, it's disconnection. The mind moves faster than emotion can keep up, and somewhere in between, meaning falls away. We were never designed to process infinite stimulation. Our ancestors stared at the horizon, not at 10,000 moving images per minute. They lived in rhythm with the earth, where each sunrise carried weight, each sound had a source, and silence wasn't loneliness, it was balance. Now, silence feels like suffocation. Because in stillness, the noise in our heads gets louder. We start hearing the echoes of our unmade choices, our unlived lives, our unresolved selves, and we don't know what to do with them. This is the paradox of modern consciousness. We know too much, but understand too little. We see too far, but connect too shallowly. We mistake access for intimacy and stimulation for experience. In our endless pursuit of more, we've forgotten how to be. Think of it like this. Your mind is a theater with limited seats. Only a few experiences can sit and focus at a time. But modern life throws thousands of performances at once. Each moment, each notification, each small ping demands a ticket. And so the theater fills with noise, while the main act, your own inner life, waits behind the curtain, unheard. Psychologists call this cognitive overload, but it's more than just mental fatigue. It's existential fatigue. When everything is available, nothing feels worth choosing. When every story unfolds at once, you forget which one is yours. And so we distract ourselves. We fill the silence with movement, music, screens, messages, anything that keeps us from looking inward. Because the moment we pause, the weight of meaninglessness presses in. We've built worlds of endless activity just to avoid the terror of stillness. The mind, ironically, is both the creator and the victim of this chaos. It invents new technologies, new realities, new ways to escape itself. Yet the more advanced it becomes, the more trapped it feels. We've reached a point where intelligence is no longer our salvation, but our burden. Because to think deeply is to suffer honestly. And we've lost the patience for that. We crave meaning, but meaning takes time. It grows in repetition, in commitment, in the things we return to over and over again. But in an economy of attention, returning is punished. Loyalty is outdated. Staying is unfashionable. The algorithm doesn't reward focus, it rewards motion. So we scroll, we switch, we move, endlessly. And in doing so, we become strangers in our own minds. Drifters between realities, half in the present, half somewhere else. Always connected, but rarely conscious. Somewhere along the way, our emotions began to thin out. Not disappear, just flatten, like echoes of what they once were. Joy became contentment, sorrow became burnout, wonder became distraction. We don't feel less because we've grown numb. We feel less because our emotions have nowhere to land. Imagine throwing a stone into an ocean. It ripples, yes, but disappears instantly. That's what modern emotion feels like. Ripples in an infinite sea of input. Nothing stays long enough to mean something. And so, we confuse stimulation with depth. We chase experiences that shock the senses because we've forgotten how to sit with the subtle ones. We mistake intensity for purpose, and when the high fades, we call it emptiness. But maybe emptiness isn't the absence of meaning. Maybe it's the space where meaning is supposed to grow, but we never let it. Because meaning requires stillness. It requires choosing something and letting all the other possibilities die. It requires loss, and we're terrified of loss. We want everything, all at once. All the love, all the success, all the experiences, without the pain of exclusion. But to live fully is to accept that you will never live everything. Every path chosen is 1,000 paths unlived. And peace comes not from escaping that truth, but from surrendering to it. That's what we've forgotten, the beauty of limits. Boundaries don't imprison us, they define us. Just as a painting needs a frame to exist, the mind needs constraints to find focus. Without them, it drifts endlessly, a painter with no canvas, a traveler with no destination. We think we want infinite freedom, but what we actually crave is clarity. To know what matters. To feel that something, somewhere, is enough. But in a world built on more, enough feels like failure. So we keep reaching for better jobs, better partners, better selves, while quietly collapsing under the weight of potential. And maybe this is the true cost of consciousness. To be aware of what could be while never being fully at peace with what is. Because the mind can imagine infinite realities, but the heart can only live one. And that conflict between what we dream and what we inhabit is where our modern suffering begins. The more aware we become, the more dissatisfied we feel. Awareness without acceptance is agony. And so the modern human becomes a paradox, a being capable of infinite imagination, trapped inside finite perception. We want to see everything, but our eyes can only focus on one thing at a time. We want to feel everything, but our hearts can only hold so much. Maybe that's the tragedy of our evolution, that the same intelligence that set us free has made us incapable of peace. Because to see the infinite is to be haunted by it. And yet, within that haunting, there's something sacred. A reminder that the very restlessness we despise is proof of our depth. That our discomfort with the limits of perception is what drives us to search for meaning at all. We are creatures built for wonder. And wonder is born not from having everything, but from realizing how little we truly understand. So maybe the answer isn't to see more, but to see better. To pause long enough to let the world reveal what it's been whispering all along. That meaning isn't hiding behind 1,000 doors, but waiting quietly in the one we dare to open fully. Every day, the average human makes over 35,000 decisions. Most of them are small. What to wear, what to eat, what to click. But your brain doesn't know that. To your neural circuits, every choice demands energy. Every decision is a microscopic act of willpower, a spark of focus, and the cost of those sparks adds up faster than you realize. This is what scientists call decision fatigue, the gradual depletion of your brain's ability to make sound choices. It's why, after a long day, even simple decisions feel heavy. It's why you stare at a menu and feel blank, why you scroll endlessly through shows but can't pick one, why people with the most freedom often feel the most trapped. Freedom, ironically, drains the brain. Each time you choose, your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for reasoning, impulse control, and planning, burns through glucose and neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine. The more options you weigh, the more your brain's energy reserves collapse. This is why simplicity feels peaceful. It's not a lack of excitement. It's neurological relief. When psychologist Roy Baumeister studied decision fatigue, he found that judges were far more likely to grant parole in the morning or right after lunch. Why? Because their brains were rested and replenished. As fatigue set in, they defaulted to the safest choice: denial. No risk, no energy required. That's how the human brain works. When overwhelmed, it retreats into safety and routine. And the modern world, with its infinite options, pushes that mechanism to the edge. We are constantly switching apps, tasks, tabs, thoughts, identities. Our brains were never designed for this level of fragmentation. Each switch demands a cognitive restart, a momentary reboot of attention. Do it enough times, and your mental bandwidth begins to collapse. That collapse is what psychologists call cognitive overload, when the volume of information exceeds what working memory can process. It's like opening too many browser tabs until the computer freezes, not because it's broken, but because it's too capable. The human brain is the same, magnificent, but not infinite. Its strength lies in focus, not in endless multitasking. When you divide its attention, you don't multiply productivity, you dilute it. And in that dilution, something profound happens. Your perception, the very lens through which you experience reality, begins to warp. You start missing details. You forget what you just read. You misinterpret tone. You lose emotional nuance. You feel mentally foggy, even though nothing is technically wrong. That's not laziness or lack of intelligence. It's dimensional blindness, a condition not of the eyes, but of awareness. When we consume too much, too quickly, the brain stops processing reality in depth. It starts flattening experience, reducing complexity into fragments, depth into surface, life into pixels. Think of it like living in a room with all the lights on. Everything is visible, but nothing stands out. There's no contrast, no shadow, no meaning. Your senses are overloaded, so your perception becomes shallow, not because you don't want depth, but because you can't hold it anymore. The more data you absorb, the less your mind actually experiences. You're aware of everything, but connected to nothing. That's dimensional blindness, a modern cognitive phenomenon where abundance kills awareness. The human brain was built to notice patterns, not to process infinity. We evolved in tribes of 150, not in networks of billions. We were meant to make a few meaningful choices, not thousands of hollow ones. Yet technology has shattered those limits. Now, at any moment, you can talk to anyone, learn anything, buy everything. It's exhilarating, until your neurons can't tell what's urgent and what's irrelevant. That's when attention fractures. And when attention fractures, meaning disappears. Because attention is meaning. Whatever you focus on becomes real. And when focus scatters, reality becomes fragmented, 1,000 moments that never connect. The irony is, we call this progress. We built machines to extend our senses, to give us superhuman access to knowledge, but not the wisdom to handle it. Neuroscientists have begun to notice that the brain's default mode network, the region active when you're daydreaming or reflecting, is less active in people who constantly multitask. In other words, the more we flood our minds with stimulation, the less time we spend in self-awareness. And self-awareness is where depth lives. It's where emotion turns into understanding and experience becomes wisdom. But today, we spend less time in reflection than any generation before us. Every pause is filled, every silence interrupted. Our inner world, once the most sacred space of human existence, has become background noise. So, even as we become more intelligent, we lose the texture of intelligence, the ability to dwell, to ponder, to sense the unseen. We are three-dimensional beings trying to navigate a flat reality. That's why digital life feels addictive yet empty. It offers stimulation, not significance. Like tasting light, it fills your eyes, but not your soul. And so we drift. Through endless information, through infinite scrolls, through the illusion of knowledge without the substance of understanding. We say we want truth, but what we really seek is comfort, and the mind, overloaded, finds comfort in the familiar loops of distraction. Psychologist Barry Schwartz called this the paradox of choice. When faced with too many options, we don't feel liberated. We feel anxious. Every decision becomes a reminder of all the other lives we could have lived. This is not just mental stress. It's existential fragmentation. Each choice we make kills 1,000 other possibilities. And we feel that death, in small, invisible ways, every single day. That's why even after choosing, we doubt. We replay the decision in our heads. We scroll again, shop again, love again, hoping to undo the discomfort of limitation. But the truth is, the human mind was not built for infinity. It was built for meaning, and meaning only thrives in boundaries. You cannot grasp the entire sky, but you can fall in love with a single star. And perhaps that's the hidden cost of modern intelligence. We've learned to measure everything, but forgotten how to cherish anything. The world tells us we can be anything. But maybe peace begins the moment we stop trying to be everything. Because the real frontier isn't out there, it's inside. In the quiet space where perception meets acceptance, and the mind learns to see not everything, but enough. The human mind is a miracle and a mystery. It built civilizations, split atoms, and sent machines beyond the stars. But for all its brilliance, it has never learned how to live with itself. We are a species haunted by awareness, aware that we exist, aware that time moves forward, aware that every joy carries its own shadow of loss. That awareness gave us art, science, philosophy, but it also gave us anxiety, obsession, and despair. The same intelligence that allowed us to see the stars also made us aware of the void between them. We call that progress, but maybe it's something else, a quiet reminder that evolution isn't always liberation. Sometimes it's confinement disguised as growth, because every new layer of consciousness opens a new level of confusion. Every time the mind expands, it sees another wall. The ancient humans feared the dark because they couldn't see beyond it. Modern humans fear the light because now we see too much. Our brains evolved to solve problems of survival, to hunt, to gather, to reproduce. But now, we ask questions it was never built to answer. Who am I? Why am I here? What does it all mean? And maybe that's where the suffering begins, in the tension between instinct and introspection. We are animals that learn to ask why, but not always to live with the answer. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." He was right. To be free is to stand at the edge of endless possibility and realize you can only live one life. Every path chosen means 1,000 unlived. Every yes contains 1,000 silent no's. That awareness, that weight of choice, is the silent cost of consciousness. But what if this isn't a flaw? What if this is the price of being human? Maybe the cage isn't a punishment, but a boundary that gives meaning to freedom. Because if everything were possible, nothing would matter. Without edges, there is no shape. Without limits, there is no art. The mind's boundaries aren't walls, they're frames. They turn chaos into structure, noise into music, time into story. And yet, we keep trying to escape them. We chase immortality through science, divinity through technology, and infinite perception through virtual worlds. But in that chase, we forget that every expansion of awareness demands a new adaptation of the soul. Our ancestors used to look up at the stars and feel small, but that smallness gave them peace. Now, we map every star and still feel lost. Because knowing more hasn't made us feel more connected, it's only made us more aware of our separation. That's the paradox of consciousness. The more you understand the world, the less you feel part of it. You become an observer, a spectator of your own existence. It's why we long for moments that silence the mind, a sunset, a song, a kiss, a storm. Moments that dissolve thought and remind us what it feels like to just be. Because when the thinking stops, the living begins. Maybe evolution's next step isn't more intelligence. Maybe it's wisdom, the ability to think deeply and still find peace in not knowing everything. Maybe the goal isn't to break free from the limits of the mind, but to live fully within them. To see that freedom isn't the absence of boundaries, it's the ability to dance within them. Look at a river. It flows freely, but only because of the banks that hold it. Remove those banks, and the river doesn't become more free, it becomes chaos. It loses direction. The mind works the same way. Its structure, its rules, its focus, its capacity aren't chains. They're the riverbanks of consciousness. And the art of living is learning how to flow between them without drowning in endless possibility. In that sense, the human journey isn't about expanding forever. It's about finding balance between awareness and acceptance. Awareness shows us how vast life can be. Acceptance shows us how beautiful it is right now. One without the other leads to madness. Together, they form meaning. That's why ancient philosophies like Zen or Stoicism aren't primitive, they're advanced. They understood what modern psychology is just rediscovering. That peace is not found in knowing more, but in needing less. Because the more you strip away, the noise, the comparison, the obsession with choice, the closer you come to truth. And maybe truth is simple, that the mind, for all its complexity, is still a child trying to make sense of its reflection. We keep searching for higher dimensions, parallel universes, metaphysical answers. But maybe the greatest mystery is the one inside our own perception. Maybe enlightenment isn't about transcending the mind, but seeing it clearly, seeing that its fears, its questions, its restlessness are all part of what makes it human. And maybe that's enough. Because at the end of every search, after every question and every theory, what remains is awareness, the silent witness behind it all. Call it consciousness, soul, or self. It's the same spark that watches you thinking right now. And it has been there since the first human looked up and wondered why. So yes, the mind is both our greatest gift and our quietest cage. It creates worlds within worlds, but it also traps us inside the limits of our perception. It dreams of infinity but must wake up to mortality. And maybe that's not tragedy, maybe it's poetry. Because meaning doesn't come from endless possibilities. It comes from choosing one, loving it fully, and letting the rest remain mystery. So, the next time you feel overwhelmed by choice, remember, it's not your weakness. It's the price of your evolution. The weight of a mind that can see too much, feel too deeply, and imagine what it cannot yet understand. And in that awareness, in that delicate space between knowing and surrender, you'll find the quiet truth the world keeps drowning out. That peace is not in escaping the cage, but in seeing that the cage was never locked. There's a strange quiet that follows every revelation. After the storm of questions, after the mind exhausts its search for answers, there's a pause, a moment when everything inside finally falls still. Maybe that's what peace really is. Not a reward, not an achievement, but the space that appears when we stop trying to outrun ourselves. Because the modern world has turned the more into a religion. More information, more success, more choices, more awareness. We are drowning in expansion, yet starving for meaning. We scroll through infinite feeds, open infinite tabs, and live inside an endless stream of decisions, each promising to lead us closer to fulfillment. But instead, we end up paralyzed, caught in the illusion that the next choice, the next insight, the next click will finally bring peace. The paradox is cruelly elegant. The more we search for peace, the further it runs from us. Because peace, unlike progress, isn't something we can pursue. It's what remains when the pursuit ends. It's the silence that returns when the noise stops. It's the clarity that emerges when we stop adding and start subtracting. Our ancestors understood this in ways we've forgotten. They built temples not to fill with sound, but to hold silence. They meditated not to acquire new knowledge, but to empty the mind of old illusions. They looked at still water and saw the reflection of truth itself, not because the water was magical, but because it was calm enough to reflect what was always there. Today, we've confused stillness with stagnation. We think that slowing down means falling behind. But maybe the opposite is true. Maybe slowing down is the only way to catch up with who we truly are. The more the world accelerates, the more we lose alignment with the pace of our own biology. The brain that evolved to make a handful of decisions a day now makes thousands, each one draining a little more energy, each one adding another layer of invisible fatigue. We call it decision fatigue, but really, it's soul fatigue. It's the exhaustion of being human in a world that never stops asking for attention. And yet, when we strip away all that noise, we realize something profound. The mind doesn't need more data to find peace. It needs direction. It needs stillness. It needs boundaries. Because peace doesn't come from what we know. It comes from what we let go of. When a sculptor carves a statue, they don't add, they remove. Every strike of the chisel is an act of subtraction, a decision about what doesn't belong. Until finally, what remains is form, meaning, beauty. Maybe peace works the same way. Maybe it's not something to be gained, but something that's revealed when the unnecessary is stripped away. Think about it. Every time you've ever felt truly at peace, it wasn't when you achieved something grand. It was in moments of simplicity, watching rain slide down a window, hearing a familiar voice say your name, standing alone in the quiet of early morning. Those moments don't add to life, they distill it. They remind us that being is enough. But our modern conditioning rejects this simplicity. It equates stillness with weakness. It sells the illusion that fulfillment lies in the next milestone. And so we chase, endlessly, more validation, more control, more clarity, not realizing that the chase itself is what keeps us from what we're looking for. Because the mind is never more restless than when it's trying to rest through effort. Peace cannot be earned. It can only be allowed. It's the difference between holding your breath to find calm and simply exhaling. The great paradox of the human condition is that everything we've ever needed has always been within the limits we've been trying to escape. Our boundaries, our mortality, our perception, they're not flaws. They're the framework through which meaning becomes possible. To want to escape them is to want to escape the very structure that allows love, art, and consciousness to exist. Because imagine if you could see everything, feel everything, know everything, all at once. Would that be freedom, or would it be annihilation? A mind with no limits isn't divine. It's lost. It has no contrast, no form, no reason to choose. Without limits, existence collapses into an infinite blur, a scream of possibility with no voice to shape it. So maybe peace comes not from infinite expansion, but from graceful limitation. From realizing that the meaning of infinity lies not in the vastness of all that could be, but in the completeness of what is. When you look at a candle flame, it exists because it burns. The wax melts, the wick shortens, each second a surrender. And yet, in that surrender, it glows. That's what the mind must learn to do. To burn, but not consume itself. To surrender, but not disappear. To exist within limits, and still illuminate the space around it. Peace is not the absence of movement. It's the harmony of it. It's not silence in the world. It's silence within, even as the world continues. You can see this truth reflected in every layer of life. In music, where silence gives rhythm meaning to in art, where empty space gives form to beauty. In breathing, where the exhale is just as vital as the inhale. And in thought, where letting go of ideas makes room for understanding. The secret to peace is not escaping the noise. It's learning to hear the silence within it. Because even chaos has a pattern, if you stop long enough to see it. We spend so much time trying to find purpose that we forget purpose isn't something given to us. It's something we create by how we interpret the limits around us. A mountain is just a pile of rock until someone decides to climb it. A life is just a span of time until someone decides to give it meaning. That's the final layer of this paradox. The same mind that traps us with infinite choice is the same one that can give finite things infinite meaning. The difference lies in focus, not what we have, but how we see it. In the end, peace is perception. It's the quiet recognition that there is nowhere to go, nothing to prove, and nothing missing. The more you fight for peace, the further you move from it. But the moment you stop fighting, the moment you sit down, breathe, and look around without judgment, you realize you were never without it. It was always here, beneath the noise, beneath the chase, beneath the story your mind keeps rewriting. The same awareness that witnesses your thoughts is untouched by them. That's where peace lives, in the observer, not the experience. The Stoics called it ataraxia. The Buddhists call it nirvana. Modern psychology might call it metacognitive awareness. But they all point to the same truth. The moment you stop identifying with every thought and desire, you are free. Not free from the world, but free within it. Because peace doesn't mean nothing happens, it means everything can happen, and you remain whole. That's the ultimate paradox. When you stop trying to control life, it starts to flow through you. When you stop trying to hold on, you finally have everything. When you stop seeking more, you see how much you already have. And when you stop fearing the limits of perception, you realize they were never limits, just the edges of the canvas you were meant to paint on. This is the quiet revolution of awareness. Not to conquer the mind, but to understand it. Not to transcend humanity, but to embrace it fully. Because peace isn't out there. It's here, free in the pause between thoughts, in the stillness between breaths, in the acceptance of the limits that make you real. And maybe that's the final truth of the paradox of choice and perception, that the freedom we've been chasing was never about choosing everything. It was about finally choosing enough. Enough to be, enough to love, enough to let go. The human mind may forever reach for more answers, more meaning, more light. But peace begins when we look at what we already hold and whisper, "This is enough." And in that whisper, the universe finally echoes back, not with thunder, not with revelation, but with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled because it finally feels like home.